Welcome everybody to Mary Giuliani Live. I am so glad you guys are here tonight. I have a fantastic show lined up tonight. We've got Dana Brown in the studio. She is an amazing woman that is a fierce advocate for youth and teens. And she is going to be speaking with me about how to help teens become more resilient and to avoid future violence, including future school shootings. And so before we get on to Dana, I just want to mention a couple things about the show. For those of you that are new to my show, the whole purpose of Mary Giuliani Live is to help you transform your life. And the reason I started the show is because 30 years ago is when I got on my spiritual and personal growth path. And after watching a ton of Oprahs and also doing a lot of personal growth workshops and all kinds of different things to transform my life, hearing other people's stories were the most powerful things for me that really helped me transform. And so that's why I'm doing the show. I love showcasing people that are really making a difference in the world that may have had some struggles themselves, and of course everyone's had struggles, but they're willing to share a little bit about their story and also inspire other people to go for it and create lives that they love too. One of the things you need to make sure about is that if you would like to make sure you know about my upcoming guests, you need to get on my email list. So all you need to do is go right up to marygiuliani.net, and there's a Get Show Updates tab on the far right. So just put your name and email address in, and I will send you a link to the previous shows so you can watch them in your own time if you would like, and also get notified of who's coming up on the show. The other thing is I have a iTunes channel, so you can get the shows automatically downloaded into your iTunes on your iPhone. Just go to iTunes and look up Mary Giuliani Live, and I will be there. The other thing that's so cool about live streaming, one of the reasons I chose this medium, is because you can ask questions in real time. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to make, with Dana here in the studio, she's an expert at empowering youth and teens to build really wonderful, strong, and empowered lives. And she's right here in the studio to answer any of your questions. So with that, Dana is she's actually the Southern California Regional Community Facilitators with ACES Connection, which is something we'll talk about a little bit. She's a founder of several youth and teen programs in schools and communities in San Diego, California. She has received numerous awards for her work as an advocate, a community leader, and a regional facilitator. She's also a commissioner on the City of San Diego's Commission on Gang Prevention and Intervention, and is the chair of the youth committee presently, and she's the co-chair of the San Diego Trauma Informed Guide team. So obviously she's very committed to this mission. And her passion is really, and her calling is all about co-creating with like-minded individuals with ACES science systems change and a socio-ecological model through advocacy, prevention, and resilience building. With that, let's welcome Dana Brown. Hey!
Hello!
Welcome!
Hello.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes.
Very grateful to be here.
Oh, well, you've been an amazing support in my life in just the, 4 months we've known each other? So, yay! Well, how I like to start is just by, maybe if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit I like to ask my guests what got them involved in this kind of work. What inspired you to even get involved with ACES Science?
Well, ACES Science, I believe...
which is adverse, go ahead.
Adverse Childhood Experiences is what
Yes.
the acronym stands for. I believe it has the power to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
I believe all of us have the power to help ourselves and others heal.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about relationship building and trust building. And as someone who... as initially a farm girl, being around nature and the regenerative components of nature, helping itself heal, I always wondered, why don't we help teach people how to get along and take care of each other? And so just throughout the course of lifetime, connecting with amazing people like you and many, many others.
Yes.
There are so many thousands of people on the front line of this with transforming systems. So
Well, cool.
It's a message of hope.
Well, great. Well, let's talk a little bit about, of course, this horrific school shooting, and of course there's been many before this. And the reason I wanted to do this show is because I know that you have some really deep insight with the work that you do as to what may have gone wrong in terms of what made a person like this do such a horrific thing. So would you mind sharing your thoughts on what maybe caused this to happen?
Well, I've had some, through tragedy, some amazing teachers in San Diego as part of San Diego Compassion Project who've had their loved ones murdered by gang violence. And I do feel in life we're all students and we're all teachers. And
yes.
what they have taught me and continue to teach me is systems really need to help people heal.
Yes.
And the systems, the horrific tragedies in Parkland and Sandy Hook and Columbine and across our nation, so many children and youth and adults are suffering. So all of us have an opportunity to become well informed on ACEs science and do whatever we can to reach out to other like-minded individuals and be part of the solution, because there are so many solutions that are out there. We work with hundreds and thousands of people who are transforming systems. So I feel the individual in Parkland. You know, I don't know for sure. I don't know his narrative, but my heart tells me that he was an isolated, lonely, empty, broken, suffering soul, and we know hurt people hurt people. And so how can we help all the young people now and their families that have endured the complex traumas and the horrific tragedies in Florida? I'm uplifted also that those young people are stepping up and as part of their healing journey are now becoming advocates.
Yes. Good. Well, I mean, from what I've heard, is that this young man was in foster care and had been had terrible things happen in terms of his. I'm not trying to justify any of this, but I'm just trying to understand what causes somebody to do such horrific things and what can we do to help prevent this. And some of the things that went wrong in the system for him were, it sounds like, related to just not having the resources and the support to overcome a lot of. He was in foster care. His mother had just recently died, and he was expelled from the school that he ended up doing the shooting. Correct? Yeah. Well, since your work is focused on the ACEs science, since maybe many of the people that are watching right now might not be aware of what ACEs is, could you just give us a brief overview, just because you are the Southern California Regional Community Manager for the ACEs Connection, and which is all about the ACEs science. So maybe you could share a little bit with the
Right, and there are individuals with ACEs Connection all across the nation. So there's a whole team. We are a conduit for what I call shining a spotlight on pockets of greatness. So
yes.
We're blessed to be able to connect with individuals like you, who I consider to be a lighthouse, and many other individuals that are having the courage to do their own healing, as well as doing what they can in service with helping systems and organizations and service providers transform their systems and program, practice, policy, procedure to cultures of care, hope, and healing, coming out of the whole paradigm shift of shame and blame. And it's, for me, working so much inner city, I think it's important that we express that none of this is about people not being held accountable. That's not what this is about at all. Everybody should be held accountable. Rather, how do we create systems that in that accountability can help transform that individual and bring them the resources they need, the disparities of access to care or language, or can't afford the bus pass. And there's so many reasons why. The shame, the blame, they don't trust the systems. There's a lot of reasons why people aren't able to access or the resources, utilize the resources, maintain the healing journey. So we need a paradigm shift.
Why don't you scoot in a little bit more for me, because I want to make sure people can see all of you. Okay, good.
Both shoulders.
Perfect. Well, and the other thing I want to mention is, yes, gun control issues are definitely need to be dealt with. So we're not saying that it's just, stuff that we're not just saying that that the only thing that needs to get handled are the systems, which obviously they do, but obviously the more immediate things like gun control and things like that as well. Like, just to help our audience get a feel, like, what would you say some of the disparities are for health and impacting youth's well-being? Before we go there, I just want to acknowledge a couple people that are in the chat area. I want to say hi to Alicia Ray and Therese and Elizabeth Holmes. So thank you for joining us. By the way, feel free to ask Dana questions or myself or make any comments you'd like. So we're glad you're here. So again, sorry, what are some of the disparities and things that really impact youth's well-being?
The one that I've seen repeatedly is trust.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust the system. Somewhere along the way, all the systems that touch a child in a youth's life, which could be preschool or not,
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhood they grow up in, the environment that they're growing up in. Of course, the schools have a big role, and there's a lot of movement, healing movement in
Mm-hmm.
trauma-informed schools. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of great things are bubbling up across the nation and world. And foster care and homeless systems and child welfare systems and juvenile justice, all those systems that touch a person's life or their family's life.
Yeah.
I think that's what bubbles up continually is trust. And on the flip side of that, we know that building relationships, research proves again and again, it only takes one consistent, supportive, caring, trusted adult in the life of another to turn that life around, to bring that individual, that child, that youth, even that adult hope.
Yes.
It's the relationship building. So if trust is one of the greatest disparities, and there's a plethora of others, access, transportation, language, money, can't afford the services, undocumented. There's a plethora of other, but that really bubbles up consistently is people don't trust the systems that are supposed to be there to help them on their healing journey.
Right.
So how do we transform that? By relationship building. And I do believe ACE's science, this depth of understanding that we can mirror neurons with each other. We, by our relationships with others, can absolutely help ourselves heal and help them heal.
Right. Well, it's interesting because as a child, growing up, I was in grade school in the 60s, not the 50s, the 60s. And, when I looked, before I came across the ACEs science, the Adverse Childhood Experiences science, I didn't really think of systems in terms of how they could have supported me better as a child. In fact, just having dinner with you tonight, I realized, oh my God, I was raised in a very dysfunctional alcoholic home, and I didn't even think that there would be anybody outside of my family to address that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I started using food and things like that to soothe myself, but there were no systems in place to address, well, I wonder why this little girl's gaining weight, and I wonder why maybe this little girl's depressed, or this person's really struggling with their schoolwork because they can't focus. And, if there were systems in place to address those issues, a lot of things could have been alleviated.
Absolutely, and even having within the systems the subsector within the system. So, for instance, a trauma-informed school is the front office staff, which is that first face that family sees when they walk in the door.
Right.
The cafeteria, the lunch duty personnel, of course, the teachers, the counselors, of course, but subsector within that sector.
So everybody is aware.
Everybody. My understanding is 7.5 billion people in the world. I feel every person needs to understand this. It's such a critically important and powerful and healing and transformative understanding, the ACEs science.
Well, and so just maybe just to touch on that a little bit more for people that might not be that familiar with it, just my take on it is, and you're the expert obviously, but just my sort of layperson take on it is that if you look at the ACEs study that had 10 questions about adverse childhood experiences when you were growing up, the more of those adverse childhood experiences you had, the more likely it would be that you would end up with some really potentially very severe issues in your life, like drug and alcohol issues, which I've had, food issues, which I've had, attention issues, which I've had. I mean, I've had all of these things, and thank God I've gotten the support I've needed to overcome a lot of these things, because it could have gone really wrong. I mean, thank God. I don't know what would have happened if it was worse for me and I was a boy and I had a lot of guns. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I would have done that, but for the grace of God, there go I. And so what the science has helped me realize is that when we're raised in these kind of environments, the toxic stress hurts us. It hurts our brain development when it's in a very vulnerable stage, and it hurts our self-esteem, and it hurts our ability to develop supportive relationships, because a lot of times just being raised in that kind of environment is so stressful that we don't trust people, or because we've never experienced that in our own family. And so I think the point of all of this is that when you talk about trauma-informed care, I didn't know what that word meant or that term meant until recently, because first of all, the other piece I want to mention is that I didn't have sexual or physical abuse, so I didn't think I had trauma until 6 months ago when I read Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. And so that's another thing that the system failed me on, is there was no awareness that the hell that I went through as a child was impacting my brain and my body, and that unless I got trauma-informed services and care, I would never really completely heal. And that's why I did a lot of work on my psyche and my mind for 30 years, but I didn't know it was in my brain and my body. So the point here I just want to kind of throw out there to make sure everybody's aware of is that having toxic stress in your childhood impacts you throughout your lifetime until you heal it. And what I realized is that I was hurt. And so I was either, if I'm a hurt person, I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt other people. I am more of an internal hurt. I tended to hurt myself. But a lot of people hurt other people. They traumatize other people, like what happened in the school shooting. So I just wanted to kind of just maybe share just a kind of a snippet of my story so people could get the value. The
magnitude of your transformation.
Yeah.
And how powerful this knowledge is.
Yeah. And that, and so anyway, so when you say, like, how are youth and teens impacted by system-induced trauma, would you say?
Well, if I could articulate the components of ACEs science.
Sure, please. Okay? That'd be great.
So the 5 components of ACEs science are the Adverse Childhood Experiences research study, initially 17,337 people in San Diego with Dr. Vincent Folletti and Dr. Robert Anda from the Center for Disease Control. My understanding now is there's been over 440,000 people that have gone through the research study. So we stand strong on very in-depth, long-standing research. This is such powerful research, and there's a plethora of quizzes that are adding additional questions to the initial 10, like poverty and human trafficking and being a refugee and racism. There's many, LGBTQ.
That was one of mine.
Absolutely. and we know that trauma it's not just childhood, it's across the lifespan.
Right.
So this depth of understanding plays out what the ACEs science is understanding how that impacts the neurology of our brain. How does that play out in the biology of our body? The impact of toxic stress, epigenetics, which is the ethnohistorical trauma piece, which is critically important because that's the history. Who we are impacts our grandchildren in our DNA. So where, I think a lot of people have heard of your zip code matters, place matters, where you're born matters. So there's
the environment totally shapes your brain and the way you perceive yourself and others.
Absolutely. And resilience building. Always need to be strengths-based. And so those 5 components, the neurobiology, the biology, toxic stress, epigenetics, and resilience building, that depth of understanding, that's the knowledge, that's the golden nugget that you share with people, and it's their discernment how they want to implement that in their own life, wherever they live, work, pray, or play. hopefully there'll be an advocate in their organization, in their sector, and that would be and that's up to that. Now, trauma-informed care is up to that individual system or agency, service provider, faith-based, whatever, who's ever infusing and integrating this knowledge. So I just feel so grateful and blessed with ACE Connection. We're a conduit of this knowledge, and others take it and transform their own lives, their own homes, neighborhoods, communities, schools, across sectors. So how are youth impacted by systems-induced trauma? There's different types of trauma.
Right.
And as you mentioned, Mary, the toxic stress of growing up, and you realized this 6 months ago when you read Bessel's book. Well, youth, certainly youth that don't have that access to care and don't have as many protective factors, have increased risk factors, are high needs youth, and especially if they don't have that one trusted, caring, consistent adult in their life, that is that lifeline for them. They're, trauma is acute, a one-time event. It's chronic, like alcoholism or poverty, living in food deserts, worried about DACA showing up at the door, having a gang house right next door, being unsafe in the neighborhood, walking
So there's
to school.
all these aspects of trauma.
All these systems. And so if precious children and youth don't know how to navigate those systems, and we can't come from a blame or shame with families. I think families do the best they can until they have more information. I'm a lifelong learner. We're all students and we're all teachers, so I'm learning every day from amazing people like yourself and others out there on the front line. So when youth are impacted by systems-induced trauma, there's such an isolation, and you can see the increase in youth suicidal ideations, if not suicide directly. For, I believe it's age 10 to 24, it's the second leading cause of death. That's staggering to even think about. And then you think things like human trafficking, when the average age is at age 14, when you're a freshman in high school, and all living with domestic violence, living in poverty, juvenile justice. 1 out of 3 African American youth, statistics prove they'll go to prison. 1 out of 6 Latino.
Wow.
1 out of 4 females are going to be sexually assaulted, molested, raped, and 1 out of 4 has mental illness.
And so that's why we're talking about this.
Staggering statistics.
Right, and so if we can face the reality and the truth, then we can get into solution.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge a few people that are here. Andy Fetzner, who was our visitor, my guest last week. Hey, Andy, how are you? I'm glad you're here. Danny, so good to see you. Also, Naomi, Sherry, Delon, and Jolene. I want to welcome you all to the show and invite you to make comments or ask questions with Dana. Dana is a fierce advocate for childhood, youth, and teen resilience. Hey, Andy has a comment. We have to teach and offer them an alternative to their norm, that unconditional love and acceptance alongside the opportunity for solutions. How would you speak to that?
Oh, Andy, you spoke to my heart. Absolutely. I think that, when, Youth Voice is something I'm blessed to do down in San Diego, and they understand all this. They go out and present on all of this, and they have well-informed calls to action with an ask on solutions. And I think that's where my passion as an advocate is. We should be modeling and walking our talk and being advocates in every single aspect of our life. That mindfulness, that being present, no matter where we are, at the grocery store, in the post office, behind a car, on the street. It's that. To me, it's leading your life through empathy.
Yes.
And being present and mindful.
Well, and that's so key, and that's actually the perfect, because I forgot to mention at the beginning, I wanted to focus on healing and how we can all make a difference. So let's shift into that. Cynthia Erickson joined. Hey, Cynthia, so good to see you. Okay, so basically, I think one of the things that just sort of popped into my mind as you were sharing is it just feels like there's so much shame, secrecy, and taboo around trauma or having a parent that's an alcoholic, or having a parent that's got a drug addiction, or a rageaholic, or depression, and so to me, part of, I think, a big shift is just making it safe for people to talk about this. Like,
absolutely.
Like, I never talked about my mom's alcoholism, or my struggle with my food addiction, or my dad being sort of emotionally shut down. It was just something that wasn't cool to talk about. So,
and can you imagine, Mary, if the systems that touched your life would have had ACEs science infused into their program, practice, policy, procedure, and
it would have saved me decades of pain, struggle, illness, addiction, you name it.
Absolutely. And when, to even nudge it a little bit farther, how important it is that all the employees within any of those systems, well, I believe they're well-intentioned employees.
Right.
They're following the policies and guidelines.
Right.
So it's the systems that need that paradigm shift and that depth of understanding of how do we create a culture of care, hope, and healing, the transformation and paradigm shift from punitive blame and shame systems. I mean, we're at the cusp of this. I mean,
well, maybe you could share some hope for the audience about all the things that are happening.
So many things.
Just maybe just maybe a brief overview, and then we can get more into specifics about what our viewers can do to be part of the change.
Absolutely. Well, there is a
good to have you.
Oh, I know. It's so uplifting. It's such a message of hope. Please consider joining ACEs Connection. You will align with literally thousands of other like-minded individuals that are on the front line of systems change and care deeply about their own healing journey, their own self-love and self-compassion, offsetting compassion fatigue. They care deeply about who they serve. They really want to advocate for the paradigm shift in systems. And I think that is such a powerful call to action, because if we don't, and we need to be well-informed, anyone can show up and complain, but let's really be knowledgeable about the reality and be well informed, and then find out what is working. How can I align with something that's working? How can I help bring human capital or financial capital or social capital and build the capacity of things that are working? There are so many solutions out there, and please do join ACEs Connection, because
that's where you're going to find them.
You're
ACEsconnection.com.
Everywhere. Interest-based, which are topic-specific, geographic-based communities. If we don't have a geographic community near you, we'd be honored if you would like to help ignite one. Mary is
I'm actually the Orange County ACEs Community Manager, so for those of you tuning in from Orange County, which I know a few of you are, join the ACEs Connection, and then join the community within that for Orange County or whatever other area. And the beauty of this movement, and this is a social movement, because this is the most incredible health crisis we've had. And I don't think people have realized that childhood trauma is what impacts someone across their entire lifetime, and impacts everybody they know. And so hurt people hurt and traumatize other people, and healed people heal and help other people.
Beautifully said.
So, by the way, I want to say, James, thank you for your comment of being part of the solution. Well, you are too, because you're here.
Very much. Wheelin' to Healin'.
Yeah, and again, Wheelin' to Healin'.
That's his book.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, he's an author.
He wrote I met him when he rode his bicycle across the United States.
Oh, my God. So James Encinas has a great book that everybody should check out, Wheeling to Healing. It's probably on Amazon. Anyway, so yes, the first step is go to acesconnection.com, find a community that you feel a passion for. For me, for example, I feel passionate about supporting children or adults that were raised in crazy, addicted, or mental health issue types of homes, because that's what my thing was. Or also adults that are struggling with addiction, weight, work addiction, relationship issues, because those are all things that I've struggled with, and I've made major breakthroughs in every single area. And so there is healing available because when you come from a traumatic background and you don't even know that you have trauma, because like I said, I didn't know I had it because I thought it had to be sexual or physical abuse, you kind of start thinking you're a little crazy. Like why aren't these things resolving in my life? Well, when you have a hyper-aroused brain from being, from having trauma, you're going to have problems.
Right, because when you're in your amygdala, in the base of the brain, because you don't feel
you're anxious.
safe.
Yes.
Right, you're
going to be anxious,
yes.
which makes you want to soothe it through food, work, drugs, sex, whatever.
Just to not feel the pain.
And then you're going to have issues typically with relationships because they don't feel safe. So there's all these things that
so many layers.
You might think are, I blame myself for them.
And that's that whole blame and shame again.
Well, because our culture does. Our culture says
we need a culture shift.
Our culture says if you have impulse control issues around food, drugs, alcohol, you're weak and a loser. And the ACE of science says, no. If you have these issues, it's because you're trying to solve a problem related to your own pain, whether it's physical, emotional, or whatever. And there are ways you can heal that and find healthier ways.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong or bad or weak about you. Everybody does things for a reason. And so having that kind of compassion has been so healing for me, and recognizing that my addictions were never my fault.
Exactly.
And my struggles were never, now I'm not saying that I'm not responsible, and you know, it's like, but at the same time, just recognizing that it was never my fault that I was born with all of these challenges. It's kind of like, it feels like as an ACEs person, maybe you can relate to this. It feels like you're starting from minus 50. You know, people that, like, I don't know how many people are raised in really totally healthy homes, but it feels like when you're raised in this kind of environment, you have all these struggles that maybe people that didn't have this don't have. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
So let's talk about some other things that everybody can do to really help children be more resilient so they don't have to do crazy things.
So when we understand how complex trauma and toxic stress impacts our brain, that we don't feel safe, perceived or real, and we don't feel safe, and we're in our amygdala, we are in the brainstem.
Right.
And we're in that hyperarousal, hypervigilance.
Right.
And so we can't access the prefrontal cortex right here, which is where the logic and reasoning, emotional control, self-regulation is in the prefrontal cortex.
Yep.
So the importance of relationships, the importance of trust. We, you, everyone in the world has the power to be that trusted relationship with another who is suffering. We all understand suffering. We all understand a broken heart, because literally you are, when you have that, when you are, even when you are that for others, you're helping people, from children, youth, adults, from the amygdala through the limbic system into the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And so those mirror neurons are firing in the brain because they feel that authenticity. You know, the eyes are the windows to the soul. It doesn't matter whatever your culture is, your ethnicity. It's empathy building. It's building resilience. It's building empathy muscles. It's leading your life through what I call heart-based language. And when you lead your life with love, others feel it. There's a calmness, there's a presence, there's hope, and everybody deserves hope. Every single soul deserves hope, and all of us have the power to be able to do that. So I encourage people to have proximity. Be whatever your passion is. People all have passion about something.
Right.
Whether it's the Humane Society, across the board, whatever, climate change and everything in between. Whatever it is, be proximate.
What do you mean by proximate?
Go, if you feel really passionate about our homeless, one day a week for an hour, go help in some way.
Okay.
There are a lot of communities that have, you know, certainly all over our nation and world, there are homeless. Serve, be a servant leader. Whatever you feel passionate about, be proximate. If it's helping, maybe you're a retired teacher, go help in the schools with everyone's a reader.
Right, so use your talents and your passions.
Use your talents, because in serving, we heal.
Right, exactly.
We build relationships, you build trust and relationships, I think, with an ACEs science depth of understanding, I feel it's going to heal our world.
Absolutely, I agree. I want to acknowledge Sue Gallagher in the chat area. Sue and I go way, way back, probably 30 years. So, yay, Sue! And she's a wonderful teacher in, I believe, still 7th grade science. So you're on the front lines with these kids.
Yes.
And so hopefully, I'm not sure if ACES science.
We have an ACES in Education. Please
yeah, so
consider.
Sue, join the acesconnection.com and then join ACES in Education. I'm not sure if they have ACES initiatives for schools in Orange County. Or
Yes,
they do.
You would be surprised. There's amazing things that are happening in Orange County.
Like what?
With educators and schools being transformed. So, if it's helpful with, can I forward you a couple of links
course,
that
please.
you can share with your viewers? Because yes, it would be thrilled, be honored to plug any of the viewers directly. You know, we're a conduit, so align you directly with someone else that feels as passionately as you do about transforming. I'm uplifted that in our nation, last time, this was brought to my attention, it was our pediatricians in our schools, our educators that were at the front line of this.
Yeah.
Well, that's nudging the needle to prevention.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
we can have our pediatricians in utero throughout in our schools, the second line of educating, our first is our families, teaching us, and then our schools. That's gorgeous. So it's uplifting when you learn from other communities of practice of how they're infused. And you absolutely have to customize it based on the assets and the disparities and the strengths and challenges of your own school, your own neighborhood, your own home, yourself.
Cool. Another question I had, especially before we did the show, I was thinking, so how can youth or teens get the support they need if they're living in a crazy home like I was, with a crazy alcoholic parent that maybe that has no interest in recovery or healing or even talking to teachers? Not that my mom wasn't, but anyway, the point is, though, is how can youth and teens get that kind of support if the parents aren't involved or are opposed to being involved?
Yeah, that's one that really tugs at my heart. Even with, I think of the youth voice leaders down in San Diego, and they understand ACES science. They understand punitive systems. They understand systems that are a culture of care, hope, and healing. They know how to advocate. They always have a call to action with an ask on solutions. That's their methodology.
Right.
And with those increased tools and depth of understanding, I call it adding tools to the tool belt to build your life. A carpenter shows up with a toolbox to build a house. We're adding tools to our toolbox to build our lives. Even with that, they still go home through that neighborhood, live in that home. This is hard. It's messy, and it's
baby steps, though, right?
It's baby steps. And what youth now are so tech savvy and social media savvy. There's some wonderful free apps that are out there.
Oh, really?
There are for youth that are mindfulness, breathing,
okay, so
meditation.
let's talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about those solutions, because that's something that you can teach kids or tell them to go to an app or something. Of course, they're going to know how to do that.
Right.
So what are some of the things that can help youth, that maybe adults can point youth towards, teens and youth
So
towards?
there's tangible tools, like different apps, and parents and adults in their life, please help them. Please help it be a safe environment for them. They need that guidance from us, because there's a lot of vulnerable things out there also with apps and social media and cyberbullying and all of that. But what I have found is helping them have tools of intentional breathing activities, mindfulness. There's little meditation bells you can put on your phone to ring every few minutes, and just
use the technology.
Utilize the technology. All the free things. There's a plethora that are chargeable, but there's many tools that are available free. And so then it's practicing them for all of us. It's that daily practice of, and we know with any of us, the more that we practice anything, the better we get. So it's to me, I hope in my lifetime that this paradigm, this tipping point, will evolve, that every system out there, cross-sector in a social ecological model, is focusing on helping their employees subsector have a thriving environment where they also feel safe.
Right.
If they're triggered, if they have secondary stress, if they're experiencing vicarious trauma with who they serve, that they
Right.
also have that sanctuary.
Awesome.
And most importantly, for who are served, that whatever that system or service provider is, they've created a sanctuary.
Yeah.
That child, that youth, that adult can feel safe, even if they can't verbalize it yet.
Yes.
But they can feel it. It's innate.
Right.
It's a divinity within. It's a heart-based connection with another, and it gives them hope.
Right.
And so, especially when you're proximate, when you're in their neighborhood, when you're
Right.
in their church, when you're in their home, you feel the dynamics, their reality.
Right.
You feel the adversities. You see the climate that they're living in, and how do we help them? I mean, we've come a long way.
Yes.
A long way. We have
Yes.
a long way to go.
Well, yeah, and I think a big part of what I've learned is, well, one of the most powerful things, and you mentioned this, but I want to touch on it a little bit more, is that how just one person that is a calm
Absolutely.
presence can make a huge difference. In fact, a former teacher of mine, David Harder, posted on his Facebook, he had a really tough childhood being in actually having adoptive parents that were really abusive. But he had one adult that said, you know what, you're not crazy, they are, just, I hear you,
I see
I
you.
empathize with you. And in fact, a good friend of mine, Carrie, also is a real advocate for teens that
Wonderful.
are struggling. And I told her, I said, Carrie, did you realize that you are that safe,
Definitely.
stable space that can be the difference between someone becoming an IV drug user or shooting up schools?
Absolutely. And so many people have been in this compassionate movement. It's who they are. They choose for their profession. It's a calling. They want to serve others.
Right.
So this isn't new news in that respect. What's so powerful is the ACEs science.
Right.
Depth of understanding is the congruence that brings all of that into fruition, into manifestation, into this paradigm shift. And so it's so critically important that every person, especially our people that are in high-level policy and decision makers, how do we reach all of them? How do we get all of the ACEs science into the boardrooms?
Right. Well, one of the things that I noticed on the acesconnection.com is you've just rolled out it's 50 states showing
State profiles,
state
ACEs
profiles.
initiatives.
So go to aces.com, check out the state profiles, and
Fabulous.
you will see your own state. And like for California, I could actually drill right down into my actual city based on what percentage of my city children have 2 or more ACEs, right? And then also what initiatives are on the docket, like
So uplifting.
And it was like, oh my God! So there's some initiatives right now trying to get passed through the government about making sure that the children have the right to have ACEs surveys in schools. So it's like this is all about bringing.
It's a movement.
It's bringing up stuff that may have been really uncomfortable before, but making it a civil right. That everybody deserves to be taken care of and supported no matter what's going on at home, and that the more people that can be supported, the better outcomes they will have on an emotional and physical level, the more they'll help the world versus hurt the world.
Yeah, we're
and
healing humanity.
Yeah. And
This is the power to heal humanity.
Right. And not even to mention, so we're talking about building resilient teens and youth, but if you don't address these issues in your teens or with your teens or your children, when they grow up to be adults and they don't get addressed, that's when all the addictions kick in, and then the health issues because of having all the toxic stress of a brain that's in hyperarousal because of early developmental trauma. And then all of a sudden when you're 50, you've got fibromyalgia, arthritis,
cirrhosis of the liver, heart.
peripheral neuropathy, all these different things that you could have prevented. So
And can you imagine if from a child in utero on, every system was designed to help that child have a thriving life, to help those families have access to care, to have schools and churches and stores and communities and cities.
Yep.
I mean, and to be led by empathy, it's really a message of hope.
Well, it is. And actually, I love that you just spoke about empathy, because you had mentioned that empathy, building empathy, I'm going to read it here, because building empathy muscles within ourselves and for each other are transformative. And why is that?
Well, empathy...
Because this is one thing people can do to help teens and youth, is being empathetic.
Well, it starts with having empathy with yourself, your own practices of coming out of shame and blame, and your own self-love. I don't think necessarily in our Western culture, I don't know other cultures, I can only speak to this one.
Right.
I don't think that we're quite there yet with saying as a culture that we walk our talk on being empathetic beings. However, a lot of people are waking up, and you can become part of the solution along with thousands of others that are part of the solution. And empathy is at the core, because you're walking in someone else's shoes. That interconnectivity of maybe you haven't been raped, but there have been adversities in your life that you understand that loss and that shame and that blame, that you can have empathy with someone that is sharing their horrific experiences with you. It's leading your life through your heart.
Beautifully said. And so what I've really heard you say is helping heal youth and teens begins with healing yourself. And how can you heal yourself if you've got childhood trauma, which most likely you do, because isn't 70% of people have at least one ACE or something?
There's a lot of suffering.
So anyway, the point, though, is how can you find help? Go to acesconnection.com. There's all kinds of support there.
Well, there's a fabulous community on there, too, for your consideration.
Yes.
Practicing resilience
for
perfect. Self-care
there
and
it is.
Healing. Just brimming with, there's parenting
support.
with ACE is another amazing one. But that practicing resilience for self-care and healing is brimming with tools.
Yes, it is. And the thing I want to add to that is just make sure whatever you do that it has a trauma-informed care component to it. Because even though I've healed a lot in talk therapy, I didn't realize until I read Bessel van der Kolk, Body Keeps the Score, that if you have trauma, that talk therapy cannot completely heal it. So that's why I needed to get into using brain and body-based healing modalities, like neurofeedback. It's been tremendous for me. Also yoga, that's a body-based therapy. Mindfulness and breathing are body-based therapies. But I did talk therapy, and not for 30 years straight, but off and on. And I still was experiencing a lot of issues because I didn't heal my brain and my body. So I just want to put that out there. But definitely join the acesconnection.com. Go to the resilience building.
Practicing resilience for self-care and healing.
Yeah, join that little group within the ACES Connection, and you'll get plugged in. So as far as just, I guess one of the things I wanted to mention about the millennials is that, they're the first global society that is interconnected around the world and with social media. And, how would you like to speak to the power of that connection and what the millennials or anybody that's connected online can do to support this cause?
Yeah, I'm really uplifted with the millennials. Eric Greenwald had written a book, Generation We, WE, and one of my daughters shared it with me years ago, and Eric had traveled around the world interviewing millennials. And I feel, in pondering the whole thing, I think because they're the first group of youth in the history of humanity that were one human family. Because of the internet, because of social media. I didn't grow up. I mean,
there was no internet when we were growing up.
I know, right? So
there wasn't even color TV when I was a little girl.
Right? 1964.
I feel like such a grandma.
I know. Yeah, I totally hear you. And so the millennials really lift me with hope because they're just such a different group of youth because they're interconnected in the whole world.
Yes.
And now the courage and the advocacy of these Parkland teenagers, really have been thinking a lot about it. It's almost like, because, I'm a baby boomer. We were talking about it when we grew up in the 60s, and we were watching all the advocacy on TV. the gay rights, the women's rights, the
civil
rights.
Actually, James is talking about that right now.
Oh, yay, James. Yeah. There you go. A science, the next stage of the civil rights movement. It's a human rights movement. Yes, concur, James. And it feels like then, who shaped a lot of us, I think a lot of us on the front line of the movement now, if we were alive then, we were shaped by that.
That's
I
so
certainly
true.
was.
I love
right?
that big picture.
Right?
Thank God for those people that came before us that helped put the systems in place that benefited us.
I mean, the women that gave women the right to vote, all the advocating they did, they never lived to see it. They never lived to vote. You know, in 2 years, we'll have had that for 100 years. Women having the right to vote. So
and now the Me Too movement.
I know. It's
so
a
cool.
hopeful time. And so the Parkland youth, the teenagers suffering horrific tragedies, they're uplifting and becoming advocates. I'm wondering if that's going to like ignite something with our millennials.
Yes.
And so this is a hopeful time.
It is. Thank you. I want to acknowledge Darlene Heacock in our chat room. Hi to Darlene. So glad you're here. And again, James, thanks for your comment. Yes, this is so. I love that. The ACE science is the next human rights, civil rights movement. And what a beautiful, it's really a movement of compassion and empathy.
Absolutely.
And I just want to speak to something too, is it wasn't until I realized that my brain and body were formed by the environment that I was brought up in. And I'm not blaming my mother or my father, because my mother and father were raised in crazy environments too. They were doing the very best they could.
They were doing what they were taught, what they learned.
Right. And so having that understanding, it helped me not blame and shame myself, blame and shame my parents or others, and it's given me a level of compassion for myself and all of humanity, because gosh, we are just so vulnerable, really. And
so much oppression, so much suffering.
And that I mean, honestly, my take on humanity is that this may sound crazy, but we're smart apes that think that we're smarter than we are, and don't realize how vulnerable our brains and our are.
Well, you say a key word too, Mary: vulnerability.
Yeah.
How do we? It's hard to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, we have to kind of like tear open those scars, those emotional scars.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so critically imperative for proximity, that safe spaces, sanctuaries are created for people to feel safe enough to be vulnerable.
Yes.
To have that interconnectivity.
Yes.
So it's a complete paradigm shift.
It is.
We isolate people a lot. We pull children away from families. We incarcerate loved ones. We deport individuals. There's a lot of pulling apart the fibers of the family nucleus.
Yeah. Well, you know, it reminds me of, it just feels like, you know, the last few hundred years has been very survival-based, fear-based sort of methods, and we've outgrown them. You know, maybe they were good at one point. I don't know if they were ever good, but the point is that there's plenty of food and resources for everybody now, so we don't need to fight over any resources. There really is plenty. To me, it's about understanding what really matters and really what the care and feeding of a human being really is.
Well, you know, even what resonated, even listening, Mary, when you were sharing about food and there's enough food, my understanding is that 1 out of 4 in our nation goes to sleep hungry every night.
Oh, thank you for
I'm
saying that.
also aware that the research I saw recently said approximately 25% of our food is thrown away every night. Now, why is 1 out of 4 going to bed hungry when we've got completely nutritious edible food in the dumpsters? That's a trauma nutrition. That's a food desert. That's a lack of access to healthy food. Paradigm shift.
Well, and you know what, Bessel, yes, and I thank you for bringing that up. What Bessel van der Kolk said was so key, is that for people not to have empathy around that, for legislators to be okay with allowing those types of things to happen where children are going to bed hungry at night or these things are happening, it's because they're traumatized and they're not in touch with their own empathy. So does that make sense? Like, and it's like, so it's sort of like what happened in a way once the tipping point happened, sort of like what happened with the gay movement. I mean, once President Obama acknowledged that he supported gay marriage, then all of these people started flipping. Everybody started flipping. And it's like, well, what happened? You know, and it was like, now it's cool to be pro-gay. So once it becomes politically correct to be pro-ACEs science, then everything starts.
And you can help do that.
And so, you know, we're almost out of time here.
Oh,
so,
dear.
So yeah, so let's like just in a bullet point, sort of like what can an individual do? Join acesconnection.com so you can find where you can meet your passion and talents in this community.
And many other like-minded individuals. People on the front line of systems.
I'm on there every day. It's a great site. What else can people do?
Add to your tool belt for your own life. Your own
healing. Do your own healing.
Your own healing.
Be the change.
Be the change. Walk your talk. Connect with other like-minded. Please consider being a mentor. Please consider being a well-informed advocate. Please consider proximity and reaching out and whatever your calling, your passion is. 1 hour a week. You know, if we had millions doing that, we'd have a paradigm shift. Now, not every problem would be solved, but it's that intentionality, that purpose.
Well, and knowing that we can do something, because sometimes it seems so big, and so these are things.
And it feels overwhelming, but it starts with us.
Yes. So heal yourself first, then and heal and be part of the solution.
The healing movement
versus the complaining. I mean, yes, you know, there's a place for venting your frustrations, but I think adding to where can you actually take action?
Your cup will runneth over. It
Yeah.
powerfully uplifting that synergy. Oh, I know we love talking about this.
Okay. So what what message are you most passionate about? You want to leave with our viewers?
ACEs science has the power to heal the world. Please align with others, learn more. Yes, it's so wonderful. This is a message of hope and healing.
Yes, awesome. Well, oh my God. And how can people get in touch with you or get a hold of you?
Well, we have a whole team on ACEs Connections, so you'll find many of us on there. Just join, and my name's Dana Brown, if I can help. Or
you can reach Dana right on the acesconnection.com.
Community manager,
Orange County. Connect with me.
Last one was Andy Fetzner, Los Angeles community manager. So we will help you start a geographic community in your own community. We'll align you with one if there is one already, Orange County. So whatever we can do to help, we're humbled to do.
Well, Dana, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Dana Brown, Southern California Regional ACEs Connection coordinator, leader, fierce advocate for teens and youth, and so many great tips on how you can make a difference. So be sure to go to acesconnection.com. I got to tell you, since I got involved with this organization, I have been on fire about this, and there's nothing more exciting than to be alive and know that you're making a difference in the world. And it doesn't take that much. I mean, it's wonderful. So, okay, so with that, I have a couple of announcements, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. Let's see. I am a life coach, and so I always do a coaching tip for my audience, and I always tie it in with the topic. And tonight's topic, of course, is about how you can make a difference in preventing teen or youth violence or school shootings. And so really, my challenge to you is think of one action, one thing you can do to make a difference, one thing you can do to be part of the solution. And what I would suggest, go to acesconnection.com, if you're in Orange County, join my community, or there's so many different places on that site that will support you in connecting in with a passion for yourself. Or, another thing is getting involved with your local teens in your neighborhood, or if you know that there's people that are having challenges, just being that kind, empathetic, supportive voice. That's something that you can do that will make a huge difference in people's lives. You don't realize what a huge difference it can make. The other piece, as a coach, I got to tell you, you got to write it down, and you got to put it on your calendar, or it's not going to happen. So you got to put it down. So I want to challenge you to do that. Make a commitment with a to-do by date, And let me know how it goes. I would love to hear from you on that. The other thing as a life coach is I love supporting women in being true to themselves and living their highest calling. So if you're a woman that is in midlife, that is looking at, wow, you know, I don't know how many years I have left, but I know that I'm not really living my calling or being true to myself, and maybe I've been so focused on supporting everyone else for my whole life that I'm not even sure who I am and what I want anyway. I can help you. I'm living my calling. I'm 100% authentic in my work and in all my relationships, and so I can help you do that. And believe me, I had a rough start, so it doesn't matter what kind of start you had, I can help you. And let's see, next week, not next week, I have the show every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to be doing a book review show. And the show is on the book Lost Connections, The Real Cause of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions by Johann Hari. And I'm telling you, if you've ever struggled with depression, anxiety, or you've been on any kind of psych meds, this is a great show because I've experienced all three of these things. And it really will enlighten you on some really powerful solutions on how you can really create a life filled with hope and love, and that you won't have to be depressed or anxious. So I would love to hear from you see you on the show in 2 weeks. I'd love for you to join me and ask questions and join in the conversation. And I think with that, what else? Well, of course, there's always my last thing, which is what's one thing that you can do to be true to yourself today? Put it on your calendar, make sure you do it, and have a great 2 weeks, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.